The sound of the classroom door locking behind her made Cassandra Morgan's blood run cold. 3 senior boys blocked her only exit, their grins promising the kind of cruelty that had already driven 2 transfer students out of Westfield Academy this year. Hunter Blackwood cracked his knuckles as he advanced, completely unaware that the trembling girl backing into the corner had spent 4 years in juvenile detention centers, where survival meant becoming something far more dangerous than any prep school bully could imagine. What happened in the next 7 minutes would become the most viewed security footage in the school's history, and by the time the screaming stopped, Hunter would be on his knees, begging for the mercy he'd never shown anyone else. Cassandra Morgan pressed her palm against the cold window of her mother's beat-up Honda Civic, watching Westfield Academy come into view. The prestigious private school looked like something out of a movie, red brick buildings with white columns, perfectly manicured lawns, and students in designer clothes climbing out of luxury cars. Her stomach twisted into knots. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to leave the past behind and become invisible. Nobody here knew about the group homes, the fights, or the anger management classes. To them, she'd just be the scholarship kid who kept her head down and stayed out of trouble. Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. "You've got this, baby. Remember what Dr. Chin said, new environment, new you. Just breathe through the anxiety and focus on your studies." Cassie nodded, adjusting her second-hand uniform blazer. The school had been her counselor's idea, a special program for at-risk youth with exceptional academic potential. Her test scores had always been off the charts, even when she was bouncing between foster homes. Books had been her escape, her way of controlling something when everything else was chaos. Now she had a chance at a real future, as long as she could keep her temper in check. The parking lot was already filling up with students. Cassie noticed how they moved in packs like wolves, establishing territory. She'd seen the same dynamics in every institution she'd been in, just with better clothes and straighter teeth. "Keep your head down," she reminded herself. "Don't make eye contact. Don't draw attention." She kissed her mother goodbye and stepped out into the crisp September morning. The main building loomed ahead, all tradition and privilege. Other students streamed past her, chatting about summer vacations in the Hamptons and Europe. Cassie clutched her used backpack tighter and headed for the entrance, already feeling like an imposter. The hallways were even more intimidating than the exterior. Trophy cases lined the walls, filled with decades of athletic and academic achievements. Oil paintings of distinguished alumni stared down at her with judging eyes. The marble floors gleamed, reflecting the chandelier light. Everything about this place screamed money and power, 2 things Cassie had never had. She found her locker and started organizing her supplies, trying to become invisible among the chaos of first-day energy. That's when she heard the laugh, deep, confident, and cruel. She'd heard that kind of laugh before, usually right before someone got hurt. "Check out the charity case," a voice said behind her. Cassie didn't turn around. She continued arranging her books methodically, controlling her breathing the way Dr. Chin had taught her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't engage. Don't react. "Hey, I'm talking to you." A hand slammed her locker shut, nearly catching her fingers. Cassie finally looked up to see 3 boys standing in a semicircle around her. The one in front was obviously the leader, tall, athletic build, with perfectly styled dark hair and the kind of casual arrogance that came from never being told no. His uniform was tailored to perfection, and a Rolex glinted on his wrist. "Hunter Blackwood," he said, as if she should be impressed. "My family basically built this school. And you are." "Just trying to get to class," Cassie mumbled, attempting to sidestep them. Hunter's hand shot out, blocking her path. "That's not how this works. See, we have a tradition here at Westfield. New students need to understand the hierarchy. And scholarship kids," he leaned in close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, "they need to understand it even more." His friends chuckled. Marcus Chun, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in the city, and Tyler Fitzgerald, whose family had been Westfield alumni for 5 generations. They had the look of boys who'd been raised to believe the world belonged to them. "I don't want any trouble," Cassie said quietly, her fingers curling into fists inside her blazer pockets. "Trouble?" Hunter's grin widened. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just establishing the natural order." You stay in your lane, we stay in ours. Simple. He reached out and flicked her collar, where a small stain from breakfast was barely visible. Maybe invest in some decent clothes first, though. This is Westfield, not whatever public school dumpster you crawled out of. The rage bubbled up inside her like lava, hot and familiar. For a split second, she saw herself grabbing his wrist, twisting it behind his back, and slamming his face into the lockers. She'd done it before, to bigger boys than him. But Dr. Chen's voice echoed in her head. Your anger is valid, Cassandra, but your future is more important. Choose your battles. Instead, she forced herself to lower her eyes. Can I go to class now? Hunter stepped back with exaggerated courtesy. By all means, run along, Mouse. As Cassie hurried away, she heard Marcus say, Dude, did you see how she was shaking? This is going to be fun. Give it a week. Hunter replied, She'll either learn her place or transfer out like the last two. Cassie's first class was AP Literature, her strongest subject. She chose a seat in the back corner, hoping to disappear into the lesson. The teacher, Miss Peterson, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who actually seemed pleased to have her there. Class, we have a new student joining us. Cassandra Morgan comes to us from the scholarship program. I'm sure you'll all make her feel welcome. A few students turned to look at her with mild curiosity, but most seemed indifferent. Cassie focused on her notebook, already taking detailed notes as Miss Peterson launched into a discussion of Hamlet. This was her element. Analyzing text, finding meaning in words, escaping into stories. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the note being passed down the row until it landed on her desk. She unfolded it carefully. Scholarship rats don't belong here. Watch your back. H. Cassie crumpled the paper and shoved it in her pocket. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction, but her hand was trembling as she tried to continue writing, and the words on the page blurred as angry tears threatened to fall. The rest of the morning followed a similar pattern in every class. Hunter or one of his friends was there, making subtle comments, accidentally knocking her books off her desk, or loudly discussing how the school's admission standards were clearly dropping. Other students either didn't notice or pretended not to, unwilling to risk Hunter's attention turning to them. By lunchtime, Cassie was exhausted from the effort of controlling herself. The cafeteria was a minefield of social hierarchies, with clearly defined territories. She bought a simple sandwich with her meal voucher, another mark of her scholarship status, and looked for somewhere to sit. Over here, a key voice called. Cassie turned to see a girl with bright purple streaks in her blonde hair waving from a corner table. She was sitting with two other students who didn't quite fit the Westfield mold, a boy with thick glasses reading a comic book, and another girl with paint stains on her uniform. I'm Lily, the purple-haired girl said as Cassie cautiously sat down. This is Jerome and Arya, with the official Westfield Misfits Club. I didn't know that was a thing, Cassie said carefully. It's not. Jerome looked up from his comic. But when Hunter Blackwood decides you don't belong, you find your people or you don't survive. Arya nodded, pushing her thick dark hair behind her ear. He made my life hell freshman year because I got the art scholarship instead of his girlfriend's sister. The best you can do is stay off his radar. Too late for that, Cassie admitted. He already introduced himself this morning. The three exchanged knowing looks. Then you're in for a rough ride, Lily said sympathetically. Hunter doesn't do anything halfway. Last year, he targeted this kid, Danny. Started with just comments and shoving, but it escalated. Danny ended up in a hospital with a mysterious concussion. His family pulled him out of school. And the administration? Cassie asked, though she already suspected the answer. The Blackwood family donated the new science wing, Jerome said flatly, and the athletic center, and probably half the board salaries. Hunter's untouchable. Cassie felt the familiar anger rising again. It was the same story everywhere. Those with power protecting their own, while kids like her were expendable. But she'd survived worse than some spoiled rich boy. She just had to keep her head down for 2 years, get her diploma, and get out. The afternoon brought PE class, which Cassie had been dreading. The girls' locker room was a maze of designer gym bags and gossip. She changed quickly in a corner stall, acutely aware of her plain clothes compared to the other girls' coordinated workout sets. When she emerged on the field for soccer practice, she saw Hunter and his crew on the adjacent field for lacrosse. He caught her eye and made a throat-slitting gesture, grinning when she looked away. Morgan, the PE teacher, Coach Williams, called out, "You're on B team. Let's see what you've got." Soccer had been one of the few activities allowed at some of her group homes, and Cassie was actually decent at it. She threw herself into the game, grateful for the chance to burn off some of her pent-up aggression. For 40 minutes, she could just run and compete. Without thinking about Hunter or scholarships or fitting in, she was dribbling down the field when something hard struck her in the back of the knee. She went down hard, skinning her palms on the artificial turf. When she looked up, she saw a lacrosse ball rolling away and Hunter jogging past with a stick. "Oops," he called out, not even trying to sound sincere. "You should watch where you're going. Scholarship." Coach Williams blew her whistle half-heartedly. "Blackwood, keep your equipment on your own field." That was it. No real consequence. No concern for. Cassie sprawled on the ground with bloody palms. She pushed herself up, ignoring the sting, and continued playing. But she could feel Hunter's eyes on her for the rest of the period, calculating his next move. After PE, Cassie was washing the gravel out of her palms in the bathroom when the door opened. She expected to see other girls from her class. But instead, Hunter walked in, followed by Marcus and Tyler. "This is the girls' bathroom," Cassie said, her voice steadier than she felt. Hunter leaned against the door, effectively blocking it. "I go wherever I want in this school. Thought we established that this morning." Cassie's mind raced, calculating exits and threats. The window was too small and too high. The door was blocked. 3 against 1, and they were all bigger than her. But she'd been in worse situations. The key was not to show fear. "What do you want?" she asked, turning off the water and facing them. "I want you to understand something," Hunter said, his casual tone belied by the coldness in his eyes. "This school has a certain standard. We've worked hard to maintain it. And then they bring in people like you, dragging down our reputation, using resources meant for students who actually belong here." "I earned my place here," Cassie said quietly. "My test scores." "I don't care if you're next Einstein," Hunter cut her off. "You don't belong at Westfield. And if you're smart, which apparently you are, you'll realize that and save yourself a lot of pain." He stepped closer, and Cassie instinctively backed up until she hit the sink. "See, here's the thing about scholarship kids. They never last. Something always happens. Maybe they get caught cheating. Maybe they get into a fight and lose their scholarship. Maybe they just break." Tyler laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the tile walls. "Remember that girl from last year? What was her name, Maria? She thought she was tough too," Marcus added, "until she wasn't." Cassie's hands gripped the edge of the sink. She could feel her control slipping, the old instincts screaming at her to fight. 3 boys in a confined space, blocking her exit, making threats. Every foster kid alarm bell was going off in her head. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, proud when her voice didn't shake. Hunter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see about that." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Cassandra," this was a friendly warning, "next time won't be so pleasant." They left, and Cassie stayed frozen by the sink until she heard their laughter fade down the hallway. Then she locked herself in a stall and let herself shake, not from fear. She'd faced scarier things than Hunter Blackwood, but from the effort of not fighting back, of keeping the monster inside her caged. She pulled out her phone and almost called Dr. Chun, but stopped. What would she say? That some rich boys were being mean to her? That she wanted to hurt them? That wouldn't help. She just had to be stronger. The rest of the week followed a pattern of escalating harassment. Her homework disappeared from her locker. Her lunch tray was knocked from her hands. Accidentally, someone spray-painted charity case on her locker door. Hunter and his crew were always nearby, watching, laughing, pushing her boundaries. Cassie endured it all in silence, clinging to her new friends and throwing herself into her studies. Lily, Jerome, and Arya tried to help, warning her about ambushes and walking with her between classes when they could. But they had their own survival to worry about. And Hunter was careful never to do anything when teachers were around. By Thursday, Cassie was exhausted. She'd barely slept, jumping at every sound, wondering what Fresh Hell Friday would bring. She stayed late in the library, partly to study and partly to avoid going home and seeing the worry in her mother's eyes. That's when she made the mistake. The library closed at 6 p.m., and Cassie packed up her things reluctantly. The hallways were mostly empty, just a few students from after-school activities heading home. She decided to stop by her locker to swap out books for tomorrow. The hallway was dim, half the lights already shut off for the evening. Cassie worked her combination lock, trying to hurry. She didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. Working late scholarship? She spun around to find Hunter blocking the hallway, with Marcus and Tyler flanking him. But this time, they brought reinforcements. 2 more boys from the lacrosse team, all of them bigger than her. "The building's closed to students," Cassie said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Not to us," Hunter said. "My dad's on the board, remember? I have keys to every room in this place." He pulled out a key ring and jingled it. "In fact, I think we need to have a more private conversation, somewhere we won't be interrupted." Cassie tried to run, but Tyler and Marcus grabbed her arms. She could have broken free. Moves were automatic, burned into her muscle memory. But using them would mean expulsion, loss of her scholarship, proving everyone right about kids like her being violent. They dragged her down the hallway to an empty classroom, and Hunter unlocked the door with practiced ease. The room was dark, except for the emergency exit light, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "See, I've been patient," Hunter said as they shoved her inside. "I gave you chances to leave on your own, but you're too stupid or too stubborn to take the hint." The door clicked shut behind them. 5 boys between her and the exit. Cassie's heart was pounding so hard she could hear in her ears. This was bad. This was group home bad. Juvenile Dutton bad. The kind of situation where holding back meant getting hurt. "Just let me go," she said, backing toward the windows. "This isn't worth it. I'm nobody." "Exactly," Hunter agreed. "You're nobody, but you're nobody who's taking up space meant for somebody, using resources meant for us, bringing down our school's reputation." He nodded to his friends, and they spread out, surrounding her. "So we're going to help you make the right decision. Transfer out tonight. Tell your mom you can't handle it. Tell her whatever you want, but don't come back." "And if I don't?" Cassie asked, though she already knew the answer. Hunter's smile was cold. "Then things get unpleasant. See, accidents happen all the time, especially to scholarship kids who don't know their place. Maybe you fall down some stairs. Maybe you get caught with drugs in your locker. Wouldn't be hard to arrange. Or maybe..." He stepped closer, and Cassie could see the cruelty in his eyes. "Maybe we just hurt you until you beg us to let you leave." That's when Cassie felt it, the click inside her mind, like a switch flipping. The same feeling she'd had the night 3 older boys had cornered her in the group home, the night that led to her first stint in juvie, the calm that came before the storm. "I tried," she said quietly, more to herself than to them. "I really tried to be different, to be better." Hunter laughed. "Trying doesn't mean anything here. Only winning matters." Cassie nodded slowly, rolling her shoulders. "You're right. Only winning matters." She dropped her backpack and shifted her stance slightly, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. The boys didn't notice the change, too confident in their numbers and size advantage. "So what's it going to be?" Hunter asked. "You going to leave, or do we have to?" He never finished the sentence. Cassie moved like lightning. 4 years of juvenile detention had taught her that when you're outnumbered, you strike first and strike hard. Her elbow connected with Tyler's solar plexus before he even saw her move. He doubled over, gasping for air, and she used his bent form as a springboard, launching herself at Marcus with a flying knee that caught him square in the chest. The classroom erupted into chaos. Hunter shouted orders, but his lackeys were already scrambling, their confidence shattered by the sudden violence. Cassie didn't give them time to regroup. She grabbed a desk and swung it like a battering ram, catching one of the lacrosse players in the ribs. He went down with a scream that was definitely going to bring security. "Get her!" Hunter roared, but his voice cracked with something that sounded like fear. The remaining lacrosse player charged at Cassie, using his size advantage. She waited until the last second, then dropped low and swept his legs. He hit the floor hard, his head bouncing off the linoleum. Cassie was on him instantly, applying a chokehold she learned from a girl who'd killed her stepfather. "Stop." Marcus wheezed. "Try to get back on his feet." "You're crazy." Cassie released the unconscious player and turned to face the others. Tyler was still curled on the floor, clutching his stomach. The one she'd hit with the desk was crawling toward the door. That left Hunter and Marcus, and the look on their faces was priceless. Pure, unadulterated terror. "You wanted to see the real me?" Cassie asked, her voice eerily calm. "The scholarship kid from the wrong side of town?" "Well, here I am." Marcus tried to rush her, probably hoping to pin her against the wall. Cassie grabbed his extended arm. "By vote," and threw him over her hip in a perfect judo toss. He crashed into a row of desks, sending them scattering like dominoes. Hunter backed toward the door, his hands up. "Wait! Just wait a second." "No, waiting," Cassie said, advancing on him. "You've had all week to wait, to think, to stop, but you just kept pushing." She feinted left, and when Hunter dodged right, she was already there. Her fist connected with his perfect nose, and the crunch was audible even over his scream. Blood exploded across his designer shirt as he stumbled backward, hands flying to his face. "My nose!" he shrieked. "You broke my nose." "That's just the beginning," Cassie said. But before she could continue, the door burst open. Security guards rushed in, followed by the night janitor, who must have heard the commotion. They took in the scene. 5 boys in various states of injury. One small girl standing in the middle of it all with bloodied knuckles. "Nobody move," the head of security shouted. 20 minutes later, Cassie sat in Principal Morrison's office, her hands cupped behind her back. The police had been called. Parents were on their way, and she could hear Hunter in the nurse's office down the hall, still crying about his nose. She should have felt scared. Her scholarship was gone. That much was certain. She'd probably face assault charges. Her mother would be devastated. But all Cassie felt was a strange sense of relief. The mask was off. She didn't have to pretend anymore. Principal Morrison entered with 2 police officers and another man in. An expensive suit who had to be Hunter's father. The family resemblance was unmistakable, right down to the cold eyes and cruel mouth. "Miss Morgan," the principal began, his voice heavy with disappointment, "would you care to explain what happened?" Cassie looked him straight in the eye. 5 boys locked me in a classroom and threatened to hurt me unless I left the school. I defended myself. "That's a lie." Mr. Blackwood exploded. "My son says you attacked him unprovoked, that you've been unstable all week, making threats." "Check the security cameras," Cassie interrupted. "They dragged me into that room." The principal shifted uncomfortably. Unfortunately, that hallway's cameras were malfunctioning this evening. Of course they were. Cassie almost laughed. Hunter had probably disabled them, never imagining they might have protected him instead of her. "She's clearly disturbed," Mr. Blackwood continued. "Look at her record. Multiple foster homes, time in juvenile facilities. This is exactly why the scholarship program is a mistake. You bring in these damaged children, and I have a video." Everyone turned to look at the doorway, where Lily stood with Jerome and Arya. She held up her phone, her purple streaked hair catching the light. "I was worried when Cassie didn't meet us at the coffee shop," Lily explained. "So we came back to look for her. I started recording when I saw them dragging her down the hall." She hit play, and Hunter's voice filled the room. "Maybe we just hurt you until you beg us to let you leave." The principal's face went pale. Mr. Blackwood's mouth opened and closed like a fish. On the small screen, they could clearly see 5 boys surrounding one girl, threatening her before the violence erupted. "Turn it off," Mr. Blackwood said quietly. But Lily let it play. showing Cassie trying to back away, trying to defuse the situation, before finally defending herself with brutal efficiency. When it ended, the room was silent except for the distant sound of Hunter still complaining about his nose. "I want that video deleted," Mr. Blackwood said finally, "and this girl expelled. If not, I'll pull every dollar my family has ever." "Mr. Blackwood," one of the police officers interrupted, "that video shows your son and his friends committing assault, unlawful detention, and making terroristic threats. The only reason they're not in handcuffs is because they're minors and currently receiving medical treatment." The officer turned to Cassie. "You'll need to come to the station to give a statement, but based on what I just saw, you won't be facing charges. Clear case of self-defense." Principal Morrison cleared his throat. "Miss Morgan, while I understand you're defending yourself, the level of violence displayed and Fran was exactly what was needed to survive." Cassie cut him off. "I've been in 13 foster homes, see, 2 group facilities, and a year in juvenile detention after 3 18-year-olds decided a skinny 14-year-old girl would be an easy target. You learn real quick that when you're outnumbered, you don't hold back." She leaned forward as much as the handcuffs would allow. "I tried to do it your way. Keep my head down. Follow the rules. Be a good little scholarship kid. But your star student and his friends wouldn't let me. So yeah, I hurt them, because the alternative was letting them hurt me. And I promised myself a long time ago that I'd never be anyone's victim again." The room fell silent again. Mr. Blackwood's face had gone from red to purple. The principal looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Cassie's new friends stood in the doorway, recording everything on their phones. That's when Cassie's mother arrived. Elena Morgan was still in her hospital scrubs, having rushed straight from her shift. She took in the scene, her daughter in handcuffs, the angry parent, the police, and Cassie saw her shoulders slump in defeat. "What did she do?" her mother asked quietly. "Mom," Cassie started, but her mother held up a hand. "Just tell me what she did." Principal Morrison explained the situation with frequent interruptions from Mr. Blackwood. Lily showed the video again. Through it all, Elena Morgan's face remained expressionless. When they finished, she walked over to her daughter and knelt down so they were eye to eye. "You promised me," she whispered. "You promised you'd try." "I did try," Cassie whispered back, tears finally starting to fall. "I tried so hard, Mom, but they wouldn't stop. They were going to hurt me." Elena studied her daughter's face for a long moment, then stood and turned to face the room. "Uncuff my daughter," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Ma'am," the principal started. "Uncuff my daughter." Elena's voice could have cut steel. She was assaulted by 5 boys who had her trapped in a locked room. She defended herself. "If you want to punish someone, start with the boy who orchestrated this attack. This is ridiculous." Mr. Blackwood sputtered. "Your daughter is a menace." "My daughter," Elena said, turning on him, "is a survivor. She's been through more in her 17 years than your son will probably face in his entire privileged life. And despite all of that, she earned her place at this school through academic merit. Can your son say the same?" She pulled out her phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation, by the way, including your attempts to bribe the principal and have evidence destroyed. I think the school board will be very interested to hear how their biggest donor tries to cover up his son's crimes." Mr. Blackwood's face went white. "You can't." "I can," Elena said, "and I will, unless—" Elena paused, looking at the principal. "Unless we handle this properly. My daughter gets to stay in school, no mark on her record. Your son and his friends face appropriate consequences for assault, and Mr. Blackwood here makes a generous donation to the scholarship program to ensure no other student has to face what my daughter did." "This is extortion," Mr. Blackwood shouted. "No," Elena said calmly. "This is justice. Something your son clearly never learned about." The next hour was a blur of negotiation statements and paperwork. By the time they finished, it was nearly midnight. Hunter and his friends would be suspended pending expulsion hearings. Mr. Blackwood, faced with the reality of criminal charges and public embarrassment, agreed to Elena's terms. Cassie was released with no charges filed. As they walked to the car, Lily, Jerome, and Arya were waiting in the parking lot. "That was incredible," Jerome said, pushing his glasses up. "I mean, terrifying, but incredible. You're like a superhero." A mild-mannered student by day, badass fighter when cornered, Arya added. Cassie managed a weak smile. "I'm not proud of it. I couldn't let them win." Lily hugged her tightly. "You did what you had to do, and we've got your back. All of us." As her friends headed home, Cassie and her mother sat in their car in silence. Finally, Elena spoke. "I'm not mad at you," she said quietly. "I'm mad at the situation, at those boys, at a system that protects bullies because their parents have money. I wanted to be different here," Cassie said, tears flowing freely now. "I wanted to prove I could be normal." Elena pulled her daughter into a hug. "Baby, you are not normal. You're extraordinary. You survived things that would break most people. You fought your way to a better life. And tonight, you stood up for yourself when no one else would. That's not something to be ashamed of." They drove home in comfortable silence, both exhausted from the emotional upheaval. But as they pulled into their modest apartment complex, Cassie's phone buzzed with notifications. The video had already spread through the school's social media networks. Messages poured in from students she'd never even spoken to. "Thank God someone finally stood up to Hunter. You're my hero. I've been his target for 3 years. Thank you. That was the most beautiful karma I've ever seen." By morning, Cassie had become something of a legend at Westfield Academy. The girl who'd taken down Hunter Blackwood and his entire crew, the scholarship kid who refused to be intimidated, the quiet student who turned out to be a trained fighter. When she returned to school on Monday, after a weekend of police interviews and legal meetings, the atmosphere was completely different. Students nodded respectfully in the halls. Some actually applauded when she walked into the cafeteria. Teachers looked at her with a mixture of weariness and admiration. But the biggest change was in the scholarship kids and other targets of bullying. They walked taller, spoke louder, took up space they'd been afraid to occupy before. The power dynamic had shifted overnight, and everyone could feel it. Cassie found her usual table with Lily, Jerome, and Arya, but it was far from empty. A dozen other students had joined them, all kids who'd been pushed around by Hunter and his crew over the years. "Is it true you trained in MMA?" a freshman asked eagerly. "Not exactly," Cassie said, uncomfortable with the attention. "I just learned to protect myself." "Could you teach us?" another student asked. "Not to hurt anyone, just to feel safer." Cassie looked around the table at the hopeful faces. Kids who'd been victims just like her. Kids who deserved to walk through school without fear. "Yeah," she said finally, "I could do that." Principal Morrison called her to his office that afternoon, but this time she wasn't in trouble. He looked tired but relieved. "The Blackwood family has withdrawn Hunter from school," he said. "The other boys involved are facing suspension and mandatory counseling, and Mr. Blackwood has made a substantial donation to enhance our anti-bullying programs and scholarship fund." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You've caused quite a stir, Miss Morgan." "I didn't mean to," Cassie said honestly. "I just wanted to be left alone." "Sometimes the most powerful changes come from people who just want to be left alone," the principal said. "I owe you an apology. We failed to protect you, and you had to protect yourself. That's not acceptable." He slid a paper across the desk. "This is a proposal for a student safety committee. I'd like you to be on it. Help us make sure no student has to go through what you did." Cassie stared at the paper in shock. "You want me on a committee after what happened?" "Because of what happened," Morrison corrected. "You've shown that our current systems don't work. Help us fix them." Over the next few weeks, life at Westfield Academy transformed. The self-defense club Cassie started grew from a dozen students to over 50. She taught them basic moves, but more importantly, she taught them confidence, how to walk like they belonged, how to use their voices, how to stand together. The Student Safety Committee implemented new policies, anonymous reporting systems, better, camera coverage, regular assemblies about respect and inclusion. The culture of fear that had allowed bullies like Hunter to thrive began to dissolve. Cassie still struggled with the attention. She'd never wanted to be a hero or a symbol, but every time a younger student thanked her for making them feel safe, Every time a fellow scholarship kid said they no longer felt like outsiders, she realized maybe this was why she'd survived everything. Not just escape her past, but to help others escape theirs. One evening, as she was packing up after self-defense club, Miss Peterson from her English class stopped by. "I wanted to thank you," the teacher said. "What you did took incredible courage." "I just defended myself," Cassie said, still uncomfortable with praise. "No," Miss Peterson shook her head. "You changed the school. Do you know how many students have come to me over the years terrified of Hunter and his friends? How many times I've tried to help, only to be shut down by administration. You did what none of us adults could do. You stood up to power and won." She paused at the door. "You're going to do great things, Cassandra Morgan. This is just the beginning." As Cassie walked home that night, she thought about how differently things had turned out from what she'd planned. She wanted to be invisible, to slide through 2 years unnoticed. Instead, she'd become one of the most visible students at Westfield. But maybe that was okay. Maybe all those years of fighting just to survive had been preparing her for this. To fight for others, to change systems, to prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Shun, her old therapist. "Heard you've been making waves. Remember, controlled strength is still strength. Proud of you." Cassie smiled, tucking the phone away. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from her past or hiding her true self. She was using everything she'd learned, everything she'd survived, to make things better. As she approached her apartment building, she saw her mother's car in the lot and quickened her pace. Elena had been working extra shifts to cover potential legal fees that thankfully never materialized. They could finally relax a little. "How was school?" her mother asked when Cassie walked in, the same question she'd asked every day since kindergarten. "Good," Cassie said, and meant it. Really good. They settled on the couch with Chinese takeout, a luxury they could rarely afford. Elena had news of her own. The hospital was promoting her to shift supervisor, partly because of how professionally she'd handled the situation with Cassie's school. "Turns out standing up to bullies runs in the family," Elena said with a wink. As they ate and talked about their days, Cassie felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the exhausted peace that comes from surviving another day, but real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to do. Her phone lit up with messages from the group chat Lily had created. "Movie night Friday. Can we practice that wrist escape again? Did everyone see the new safety protocols?" "We did that." Cassie smiled, typing back responses. These weren't just classmates anymore. They were friends. Real friends who'd stood by her when it mattered most. Later that night, as she worked on her Hamlet essay, Cassie thought about the prince's famous question: to be or not to be. For so long, she'd chosen not to be seen, not to be known, not to be herself. But sometimes life doesn't give you that choice. Sometimes you have to be exactly who you are, scars and all. She wrote about how Hamlet's indecision came from privilege. He had the luxury of contemplation. But for people like her, people who'd face real danger, action wasn't a choice but a necessity. Her essay concluded, "Perhaps the real question isn't whether to be or not to be, but who to be when the world tries to tell you you're nothing. The answer I've learned is to be yourselfie, unapologetically, and with the courage to defend that choice." Miss Peterson would later call it one of the best essays she'd ever read. But Cassie didn't write it for the grade. She wrote it because she finally understood her own story. The semester flew by in a blur of classes, committee meetings, and self-defense sessions. Cassie's grades remained excellent. It turned out it was easier to focus on schoolwork when you weren't constantly looking over your shoulder. She even started tutoring other scholarship kids, helping them navigate both academics and the social minefield of Westfield. When winter formal came around, Cassie actually considered going. In her old life, school dances were just another opportunity to be targeted. But now Lily was insisting they all go as a group. "Come on," Lily pleaded, spreading dress options across Cassie's bed. "We'll stick together. It'll be fun. Besides, you deserve to have normal high school experiences too." "Normal?" Cassie laughed. "I don't think I'll ever be normal." "Good. Arya said from where she was painting her nails in increasingly elaborate patterns. Normal is overrated. Be extraordinary instead. So Cassie went to her first school dance wearing a simple black dress her mother had found at a thrift store and altered to fit perfectly. She danced with her friends, laughed at Jerome's terrible moves, and for a few hours felt like just another teenager. The magic was only slightly broken when a sophomore approached her nervously. Cassie, I hate to bother you, but there's this guy who won't leave my friend alone." Without hesitation, Cassie followed the girl to where a senior was aggressively hitting on a clearly uncomfortable freshman. One look from Cassie, and he backed off immediately. "Thanks," the freshman whispered. "Everyone says you're like our guardian angel." "I'm not an angel," Cassie said gently. "Just someone who knows what it's like to need help. You girls stick together, okay? And if he bothers you again, tell me or any teacher immediately." As she walked back to her friends, Lily smiled knowingly. "You can't help it, can you? Protecting people. Someone has to." Cassie shrugged. "Yeah." Jerome adjusted his bow tie. "And isn't it cool that it's you?" The rest of the year passed in a series of small victories. The Self-Defense Club became an official school organization with funding and a faculty advisor. The Safety Committee's initiatives reduced bullying incidents by 60%. 3 more scholarship students joined the student government. Their voices no longer silenced by intimidation. Cassie even received a letter from Hunter, a court-mandated apology that sounded like it was written by his lawyer. She threw it away without finishing it. Some apologies come too late to matter. As junior year drew to a close, Cassie found herself in Principal Morrison's office again, but this time for a very different reason. "I've had a call from Columbia University," he said, barely containing his excitement. "They've been following your story, your grades, your leadership, what you've done for school culture here. They want to offer you early admission with a full scholarship." Cassie stared at him in shock. "Columbia? But I'm just a junior." "An exceptional junior," Morrison corrected. "They have a program for students who've overcome significant challenges while maintaining academic excellence and showing leadership. You're exactly what they're looking for." He slid a folder across the desk. "Think about it. Talk to your mother, but Cassie, you've earned this." That night, Cassie and Elena sat at their kitchen table staring at the Columbia materials like they might disappear if they looked away. "Ivy League," Elena whispered. "My baby got into the Ivy League." "I haven't said yes yet," Cassie reminded her. "Why wouldn't you?" Elena asked. "This is everything we've worked for, everything you fought for." Cassie traced the university logo with her finger. "What about the Self-Defense Club, the Safety Committee, all the kids who count on me?" Elena took her daughter's hands. "You've taught them to stand up for themselves, to support each other. That won't disappear just because you graduate early. And think of what you could learn at Columbia, the impact you could have on a larger scale." It was true. Cassie had started thinking beyond Westfield, about systemic changes that could help kids like her everywhere. Maybe Columbia was the next step in that journey. "Besides," Elena added with a grin, "you'll only be a train ride away, close enough to come back and check on everyone." The decision in the end wasn't that hard. Cassie had spent so long in survival mode that she'd almost forgotten to dream about the future. Columbia represented everything she'd never dared to hope for, a chance to be valued for her mind, to learn from the best, to prepare for a career where she could make real change. When she announced her early graduation at the next Self-Defense Club meeting, the room erupted in mixed emotions: pride, sadness, excitement, worry. "Who's going to protect us?" a sophomore asked anxiously. "You're going to protect each other," Cassie said firmly. "That's what I've been teaching you. Not to depend on one person, but to build a community that stands together." She looked around the room at faces that had become so familiar. "I'll train senior leaders before I go. We'll set up a system. And I'll be back to visit. I promise." Lily raised her hand. "I nominate myself as president of the Cassie Morgan Fan Club and keeper of her legacy." "Seconded," Jerome called out. Soon the whole room was laughing and planning for continuity. On Cassie's last day at Westfield, the school held an assembly. She tried to object, hating the spotlight as always, but Principal Morrison insisted. "You changed this school, he said simply. The least we can do is say thank you. So Cassie sat on the stage, squirming uncomfortably as speaker after speaker talked about the impact she'd had. Students shared stories of feeling safe for the first time. Teachers praised the improved school culture. Even some parents spoke about how their children had found confidence through her programs. When it was finally her turn to speak, Cassie looked out to sea of faces. Kids who'd been victims, kids who'd been bystanders, kids who'd found their voices. She thought about Hunter and his crew, now scattered to different schools or dealing with legal consequences. She thought about her own journey from terrified foster kid to Ivy League-bound leader. I'm not good at speeches, she began, earning supportive laughter. But I want you all to know something. What happened here, the changes we made, that wasn't because I'm special. It's because we decided together that fear shouldn't run our lives, that everyone deserves to feel safe, that standing up for each other is more powerful than standing alone. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I know some of you are worried about me leaving, but you don't need me anymore. You have each other. You have systems in place. You have your own strength. Use it. Keep building on what we started. Make this place even better. Her voice grew stronger. To anyone out there who's being bullied, who feels powerless, who thinks they just have to endure it, you don't. Find your people. Use your voice. Get help. Fight back if you have to. You deserve to take up space in this world. You deserve to be safe. And you are stronger than you know. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Cassie tried to escape, but students kept stopping her for hugs, pictures, and promises to stay in touch. By the time she finally made it to her mother's car, she was emotionally drained but oddly satisfied. Ready for the next adventure? Elena asked. Cassie looked back at Westfield Academy one last time. It looked the same as that first terrifying day. Red brick, white columns, perfect lawns. But everything had changed. She had changed. Yeah, she said, settling into her seat. I'm ready. As they drove away, Cassie's phone buzzed with messages from Columbia. Orientation information, housing forms, scholarship details. The future was rushing toward her, bright with possibility. But she'd never forget Westfield. Never forget that sometimes the worst moments of your life can transform into the most important. Sometimes you have to fight to find your place in the world. And sometimes when you stand up for yourself, you end up standing up for everyone. The scholarship kid who just wanted to be invisible had become unforgettable. The girl who tried to hide her strength had used it to protect others. The survivor who thought her past was a burden had discovered it was actually her superpower. And this was just the